Today I'm going to be talking about Jewish alchemy and Kabbalah. So before we dive into it, I thought perhaps we could start with some definitions of what we mean by Jewish alchemy, or Kabbalistic alchemy for that matter. So simply put, I'm referring to Jewish alchemy as alchemy practiced by Jewish practitioners, and Kabbalistic alchemy as alchemy practiced by the Kabbalists. This helps us avoid certain questions that have been raised in scholarship, like what makes alchemy Jewish? What's Jewish about sublimations or transmutations, ingredients like mercury or sulfur, or apparatuses like crucibles or alembics? It is these types of questions that led many to believe that the phenomena of Jewish alchemy was either minimal or non-existent. While I don't have time to go fully into all the debates in the scholarship about this, I do want to highlight two voices that I think are worth mentioning. The first is Gershom Scholem. He's possibly best known for being the father of modern academic study of Jewish mysticism, but he actually also wrote about the topic of Kabbalah and alchemy. And while he does acknowledge that there is some Jewish and in turn Kabbalistic interest in alchemy, the fascination, he believed, was mostly by non-Jews. And much like the phenomena of Christian Kabbalah, which he viewed as a poor imitation of the Jewish and the more authentic form of Kabbalah, he viewed the topic of Kabbalah and alchemy as being more prominent with these individuals, which he viewed as imitators or charlatans. And he actually goes there. On the other side of the debate, we have the Jewish historian Raphael Patai, who in his work, The Jewish Alchemist, he demonstrates a more positive attitude toward the subject, although perhaps we could say an overly positive attitude, given the many speculative assumptions that he's making. Of course, this is actually secondary to the criticism that he mostly is criticized for by scholars. And that is that he actually ignores Scholem's point of view entirely, completely ignores Scholem's research. There's many book reviews that you can look up, and this is really the main criticism that people point out, and essentially everybody just sided with Scholem. So in the end, it was Scholem's view that won over. And with a few minor exceptions, the scholarship of Jewish alchemy has been in a state of arrested development ever since. This is in contrast to the scholarship of Western alchemy, for example, where we have many historians, works, and even journals devoted to the subject. Nevertheless, the Jewish element is acknowledged in Western alchemy, particularly by its practitioners, as one of the earliest and most celebrated figures in alchemy is Mary the Jewess, mentioned by Zosima of Panopolis, who was talked about before, who describes her as his mentor. And here we also see it. We've also seen this before. Here we see it in the work of Michael Meyer. Mary the Jewess is featured right next to Hermes Trismegistus. So if Hermes, we can consider Hermes as the father of alchemy, Mary the Jewess can certainly be considered as its maternal counterpart. As for the practices of the Jewish alchemists themselves, I need to point out a couple of key points that we need to keep in mind. First, Jewish alchemy was more than just transmutations. The Jewish practitioners had a very broad understanding of alchemical practices. And here we see that, we have transmutations, but it's also general metallurgical operations, smelting, melting, assaying, smithing, jewelry making, distillations, or just using an alembic or any sort of chemical purification process, and even medicinal remedies. So we're really talking about general manipulation of substances. The other point I need to mention is that alchemy is a foreign term, so it was not widely used. The closest term for an alchemist in the Hebraic vernacular is Ṣoref, which literally means a refiner or a smith. And in fact, this was quite a popular occupation amongst the Jews. Now, the term tziruf is unique because it has multiple connotations. Yes, it could refer to physical manipulation of substances, but it also has a metaphysical aspect because tziruf can also refer to letter permutations and the use of divine names. These are usually associated with magic and prophetic practices. So we see here an overlap with the idea of alchemy. Now, when it comes to letter permutations, we have to mention the work Sefer Yeṣirah, or the Book of Formation. This is a very mysterious work. Its authorship and dating is still very much debated among scholars. The work posits that the Hebrew alphabet is, in effect, the best way that I can describe it is the DNA of existence. So reality is made up of Hebrew letters, almost like a computer program. And if you know how to code or create your own programs, you can make changes in reality or even manifest things yourself. So you can see how these types of ideas would appeal very much to an alchemist interested in manipulation of substances. In the Jewish literature, we also see some discussions relating to Sefer Yeṣirah and letter permutations, which undoubtedly served as inspiration for anyone who wished to pursue such practices. So this is an example from the Babylonian Talmud. This is from antiquity. Rav Hanania and Rav Rishaya would sit every Sabbath Eve and engage in a study of Sefer Yeṣirah, and a triple calf would be created for them. This is just one example of how you can manifest things with Sefer Yeṣirah. I should mention that this particular mention, it's been debated if the Sefer Yeṣirah mentioned here is the actual Sefer Yeṣirah that we know of today. Some scholars say yes, some scholars say no. And also in manuscripts, there's actually different terms listed here. Sometimes it's the laws of formation, sometimes it's the chapters of formation, sometimes the book of creation. So it doesn't always say Sefer Yeṣirah. But this verse and others have served as the inspiration that the people believe, and the Kabbalists especially, believe that this it is this Sefer Yeṣirah that we know of today that helped manifest things. We also have to talk about the biblical Bezalel ben Uri, most known for being the architect and builder of the temple in Jerusalem, and of the Urim and Tumim, the breastplate worn by the high priest that allowed communications with God. In the Bible, we have this famous quote: "The Lord spoke to Moses, see, I have called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I filled him with divine spirit, with ability, intelligence, and knowledge in every kind of craft, to devise artistic designs, to work in gold, silver, and bronze, in cutting stones for setting, and in carving wood in every kind of craft." So now we see it's not just about the physical aspect, right? They have to be filled with divine spirit, right? So this is the beginning of this idea of the esoteric craftsman that we see in Jewish literature. And in the Talmud, it also confirms that Bezalel knew how to permeate the letters of which the heavens and earth were created. So we can start to see how the Jewish sources help shape the perception of the alchemist as this esoteric craftsman that is connected with the divine and is able to manipulate reality. Now, the sacredness of the Hebrew letters and letter permutation techniques can also be found in Kabbalah. Kabbalah itself started around the 12th and 13th century, and in addition to the methods involving Hebrew letters, we also have another system that we need to talk about. This is this configuration here. This is known as the Sefirot, or also the Tree of Life. And the Sefirot are essentially divine emanations that are believed to emanate from the infinite. And they're arranged in various ways, and this is one of the more popular way that it's arranged. There's also an extension of this configuration where we have Kabbalistic worlds that are associated with different levels. So sometimes it's represented like this, where we have a sub-tree in each one of the worlds. And this whole thing can also refer to what's known as the general tree. So this would be the general tree. There are a few ways to actually analyze and look at this image as well. One of the more prominent ways of viewing it is considering the top 3 Sefirot as separate from the lower 7. So the top 3, given their proximity to the source, give them special lofty or supernal status over the lower 7. Now, this division became popular because with these lower 7, we can now easily correspond other things to it, like the 7 planets or the 7 metals. We see that also in Western literature. Here we have Cornelius Agrippa, the book of 3 books of occult philosophy. This is his correspondences table, and we see the Sefirot featured in there. Athanasius Kircher also brings it in his correspondences tables. And Gershom Scholem actually did us a favor and corresponded it with shows us a comparison between alchemical metals. Here, this is mainly the correspondence is based on a work called Kabbalistic and alchemical work called Ṣoref, the refiner's fire, and it's being contrasted with the works of Chaim Vital, who was a student of Isaac Luria, the founder of Lurianic Kabbalah. And I brought this in to show that the correspondences don't always match up. There are some there are some differences. Now, Chaim Vital was known not only as a Kabbalist, but also as an alchemist, and he actually made it into the news very, very recently. This is his gravesite in Damascus, and about 3 or 4 weeks ago, literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, a few grave robbers desecrated the grave, and according to some preliminary investigations, the vandals were supposedly looking for gold, which was presumed to have been buried with the body of Chaim Vital. So this is very, very, very recent. This is the grave of Chaim Vital's mentor, Isaac Luria. Isaac Luria was born in Jerusalem, grew up in Egypt, and spent the last years of his life in the city of Safed. And it's in his very, very short tenure there, he revolutionized Kabbalistic thought to the point where, for the most part, every Kabbalistic trend that kind of came afterwards was some form of Lurianic Kabbalah, or at least borrowed heavily from it. Now, for our purposes, one of the fascinating things about the Lurianic system is that we can actually see alchemical ideas embedded within the Kabbalistic doctrines themselves. It's important to note that these are not metaphors per se, but actual physical alchemical precepts that are represented metaphysically. Specifically, we see examples of how both the macrocosm and the microcosm function as alchemical vessels that, much like alembics or alchemical steels, are designed to sublime and purify substances. In Lurianic terminology, this process is known as tikkun, or rectification, which is in itself an alchemical term. On a macrocosmic level, during the creation process, the universe experienced a few catastrophes resulting in a cosmos described as a vessel containing divine light that is trapped amongst impurities known as shells, or the klipot. The task to liberate these sparks of divine light was bestowed upon humanity, with the idea that through spiritual work, we can sublime the trapped light upwards, and through the process of sublimation, the klipot break off, leaving the divine light free to ascend back to the source, while the impurities settle at the bottom of the vessel. So here we see a description from one of Luria's other students: when the souls of the righteous ascend with the sparks of purity from the world of Asiyah to Yeṣirah, and from Yeṣirah to Briah, and from Briah to Atzilut, these are the 4 Kabbalistic worlds that we saw before, the klipot, or the shells, will not have power to remain cleaved onto the sparks. So in here we see an example of the alchemical pelican performing the sublimation right next to the macrocosmic example. So the pure vapors ascend up, and then the impurities settle at the bottom. They remain at the bottom and settle down there. This is known as the deadhead, or the caput mortuum, and the similar process happen at the macrocosmic level. Similar processes happen at the microcosmic level, where the human body becomes the purification vessel. Time and time and again, we see that activities like eating, fasting, and even sexual intercourse follow these same alchemical principles. So, for example, when a person eats, they can liberate souls that are trapped in food. The pleasure that one experiences during the eating process sublimes the light of the soul, and it ascends up to the person's head and back to the infinite, while the shell, which contained the soul, descends down and is discarded as excrement. This is another quote from the same source. And therefore he fasts so that he may raise upwards, or sublime, to a high level, the nefesh, or ruach, that he ate. And another meaning is that eating starts from below and ends up above. When it gets sent to the body, it rises up to the head. And in some sources, it says it goes beyond the head all the way back to the divine source. Before I conclude, I'll just briefly mention some processes that happen during sexual intercourse, which highlights the symbiotic relationship between the humans have with the divine. The union below brings about the union above between the divine masculine and the feminine. However, the sexual interaction below, that is with humans, also begins with divine intervention. This description comes from Luria's own writing, which explained that sexual arousal is in part divinely inspired, and it comes in the form of divine influx that descends down from the divine hypostatic realm, condenses down the spine, and then becomes sexual fluids. Then once again, it is the pleasure that one experiences during sex that sublimes the influx and the fluids back up. This culminates in the orgasm, which the male sexual fluids go up into the female and then back up to the source. And then so we get this sort of like this reflexive cycle with the divine. This process resembles some of the alchemical imagery that we see in Western alchemical works. Here's a double Belican from the La Porta, and also the image of coitus in the Rosarium Philosophorum. In conclusion, I hope that you enjoyed this very, very brief synopsis of Jewish alchemy and its relationship to Kabbalah. I hope that I provided you enough examples that demonstrate that alchemical processes appear in Jewish and Kabbalistic literature more prominently than previously thought. Hopefully with the aid of this printing and my PhD dissertation and hopefully its publication thereafter, this phenomena is not going to be so quickly dismissed in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I'm trying to summarize and define myself the uniqueness of Jewish alchemy. Jewish in contrast to Christian and Muslim alchemy, and alchemy in contrast to the Kabbalah. So what is specific about Jewish alchemy
I think
from what you said?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think that answering the question, it's really the identity of the Jewish, the religious identity of the practitioners that really sets it apart. They had, they wrote in their own languages, Hebrew and Aramaic. They were influenced by specific sources, like I showed, like with the Talmudic and like also Kabbalistic literature, and it sort of created its own genre. In itself. So I think that that's essentially what makes it separate. We could get into it a little bit more and ask, well, what makes someone Jewish? Do we include in this genre people who converted to Judaism or out of it? Or what about works that, people pretend to be Jewish, but maybe they're not really Jewish, But it gets into that kind of territory. But I think it opens up a whole other, a whole arena of literature when we just consider it, we're just talking about alchemy practiced by Jewish practitioners.
Mary the Jewess, she was Jewish.
Yeah.
But did she contribute to Jewish alchemy?
She was certainly inspirational. We definitely see, she was inspirational also in Western alchemy, but really some of the principles that she came up with, like the bain-marie, like this device that's still used in some kitchens today, I'm trying to think if the Kabbalists actually refer to her. I don't really, the Kabbalists not so much, but we do see, like for example in the Cairo Geniza, there's alchemical fragments and some more like Hebraic, medieval Hebraic alchemy that do actually reference her, and there's some theories about also like who she actually was, and but very little sources on this.
Interesting. Quite a lot of women in alchemy.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.